With 32 NFL teams, there are obviously teams in different states than others. We have teams like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Kansas City Chiefs and Buffalo Bills expected to compete for a Super Bowl title this year, while teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New York Jets both recently selected in the top 2 of the first-year player draft, and although they are expected to long-term compete with their new franchise quarterbacks in Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson, those teams are not expected to go 14-3 and run the table this year in each of their quarterbacks' rookie season. However, across the league there are several teams in win now mode, meaning they do not have the brightest long-term outlook and they need to win this year. Otherwise, there will be potential firings, there will be potential players and big name players at that getting moved to either increase capital in the offseason or to simply receive draft picks for the said player before they leave in free agency. Now, before we dive into the teams that are in win now mode, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as each only take a second to do and it would be very much appreciated. Now let's begin. And we begin today's video with the Los Angeles Rams, and it is pretty obvious as to why they are in today's video. They traded former starting quarterback for them, Jared Goff, and 2 first-round picks this offseason to trade for their new franchise quarterback, Matthew Stafford. And while they maybe did overpay to get Matt Stafford because he is better than Jared Goff, but is he 2 first-round picks better than Jared Goff in the long-term outlook is another question. They are undoubtedly in win-now mode. If they don't win this year with Stafford, then maybe there's 2022, but the reasoning for this team that they are in today's video is they do not have a bright future in terms of who they can possibly get, because they do not have a first round pick until 2024. Now, obviously, not having a first round pick in the past 4 or 5 drafts has not impacted the Rams that much. They've been a pretty consistent football team, and honestly, if this is their approach for the rest of time with Sean McVay as the coach, then good for them, and if it works out for them, awesome. But Matt Stafford will have to go from winning 0 career playoff games, granted he probably should have won one back in 2014, to winning a Super Bowl title to ultimately make this trade worthwhile. Jared Goff did lead the Rams to the Super Bowl, and although they did only put up 3 points in that said Super Bowl, he did get them there, which is a lot more than other quarterbacks in the past 5 years have done. When you think of the quintessential team that is in win now mode, I think you immediately have to start with the Los Angeles Rams, and really they could have been that for the past 2 or 3 years for that matter, because they are not interested in sitting around and having a slow rebuild, and good for them, might I add, because teams' fan bases generally do not want to go through a long rebuild of what might happen. In a rebuild, you are expected to get better, but that doesn't always happen, and you have teams that are just consistently bad for a while that get stuck in a rebuilding rut for what seems like a decade or 2 at a time. So credit to the Rams for going balls to the wall in terms of trying to accumulate a championship, or multiple championships for that matter, but they are undoubtedly in win now mode, and they will probably be in win now mode a year from now when I do this video in 2022. Next is the Cleveland Browns, and hear me out when I say this, because yes, they do have a very bright future as a lot of the players on their team are young, but that is kind of what I want to reiterate and why they are in win now mode is Baker Mayfield is still on the rookie contract, and as I record this, he has not signed a $100+ million extension yet, and when he does, as we have seen with countless other teams around the NFL, a lot of things change with that said team and the salaries regarding that said team, and the Browns will need to pay Baker. They'll also need to pay a pretty good corner that they have in Denzel Ward, who was also a first-round pick back in 2018. As we know, they just recently signed Nick Chubb to a 3-year extension, and congratulations to him and his family for securing financial freedom for probably the rest of their lives with that said extension. And of course, they also have to sign a player who was very quietly a second-team All-Pro player in 2020, and that is right guard Wyatt Teller. So the Browns will have 3 big players to sign, and I would imagine, well, Baker obviously won't sign for less than $10 million per year. Wyatt may be the only one out of those 3 to agree to that type of deal where it is less than $10 million per year, because as we know, Denzel will obviously require a lot more than that per year, and rightfully so. So having said all of this, that is why I do think the Browns are surprisingly in win now mode, and by the way, they will probably not be able to re-sign Kareem Hunt unless Kareem takes a very team-friendly contract. I wouldn't put it past him, but in the same sense, because by the way, he is from Ohio, went to Toledo, and I'm sure he loves the Cleveland area. But what I'm saying is Kareem has a very limited time frame to quote-unquote get the bag, and if he does want to go get that bag, then I would not blame him for doing so. So due in large part to future contract negotiations between a lot of players on their team, I do think the Browns are in win now mode. They have a lot of players signed to extensions like Nick Chubb, like Myles Garrett, but they surprisingly also have a lot of big contracts on the team, like an Odell Beckham who had a 5-year $90 million deal, like an Austin Hooper who signed a 4-year $42 million contract in free agency. So very quietly, the Browns cap space is going to be a problem in the next year or two, and for that reason I think they are in win now mode. And I love their roster and think they can go as far as it takes them, but for the sake of today's video and having said all of those contractual negotiations, I do think the Browns are in win now mode in 2021. And now we move on to the next team, which is the Minnesota Vikings. So the reason why the Minnesota Vikings are in today's video is pretty obvious. They have quarterback Kirk Cousins, who is under one of the heaviest contracts in the NFL in 2022. 2021, it is not very heavy, but 2022, he is owed $45 million. And a lot of the players on the team now, like Patrick Peterson, for example, will not be on the roster in 22 due in large part to Kirk's contract. Now, whether GM Rick Spielman can either extend Kirk another year and relieve some of that cap hit in 2022 to 2023, or simply just convince Kirk to take less money for a bigger bonus type deal, it's going to be very stressful under the cap. Now, can Rick Spielman convince Kirk to relieve some of that cap hit to 2023 and extend a bonus? Well, we'll find out. But for 2021 specifically, the Vikings defense will be much improved compared to what it was in 2020. This defense last year was horrific, and when you lose 3 Pro Bowl starters in one starter for 5 games of the year, another for 15 games of the year in Anthony Barr, and another for the whole season in Danielle Hunter. By the way, the first starter for 5 games was Eric Kendricks. Well, needless to say, you're going to see a lot of changes, and not good, because you're not going to have linebackers that you pick up that are free agents mid-season in Eric Kendricks' case that are going to come in and play at the level he was, and same ways with Anthony Barr, and the pass rush simply is not going to be the same without the youngest player to record 50 sacks in NFL history in Danielle Hunter. So, needless to say, this defense, and that's not even including the return of Michael Pierce, the additions of Dalvin Tomlinson and Patrick Peterson, this defense is going to be much improved in 2021, and I do think the Vikings are going to surprise a lot of teams whenever they come out and play very well. This team is, by every definition, in win now mode. Mike Zimmer has been very vocal about the COVID situation in Minnesota, and I'm going to leave it at that. But this team is in win now mode, and with the Packers situation seemingly over, that Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams are there, can they take advantage of it being the final year for them, or will the Minnesota Vikings fall second in the division to Green Bay once again? Regardless, it is a must-win year for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, as we enter the final couple of minutes of the video, there are several teams that are, in theory, in win now mode, because the Bucs obviously aren't looking to rebuild with a 44-year-old Tom Brady. The Packers, obviously, with Aaron Rodgers and all of the comments he made, definitely are not in rebuild mode. They're certainly in win now mode. Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll, DK Metcalf, Jamal Adams, and everyone else on that roster certainly isn't saying, you know what, let's go 5-12 this year, pick up a great player in the draft, and call it in for 2021. So there's a lot of other teams that are, in theory, in win now mode. But to wrap up today's video, I am going to go with the Pittsburgh Steelers because of it, at least at this time, we are assuming this is Ben Roethlisberger's final season as a starter and as a player for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I would have liked to include the Indianapolis Colts with Carson Wentz and Frank Reich, but obviously, a couple things have went sour for them in the past couple of days, with Carson Wentz potentially being out for 12 weeks and Quentin Nelson also needing surgery, or not needing surgery now, but being out for 5 weeks. So there's a lot going on in Indy. But for Pittsburgh specifically, the franchise quarterback since 2004, and by the way, since I was in elementary school, is entering what is supposed to be his final year. So this is, by every definition, win now mode. Now, Ben won 2 Super Bowls early on and has yet to win a Super Bowl in over a decade. Steelers fans, that's not slander, that is merely a fact. But if he could get a 3rd ring, I do think it would do a lot for his legacy. Now, he's been a 2-time Super Bowl champ for a while, for over a decade, as we said, and adding a 3rd one, and really to conclude on that final ring with Juju, with Chase Claypool, with Najee Harris, with Deontay, with everyone, Pat Freiermuth, Eric Ebron, it would be awesome. And of course, the loaded defense with players like Minkah Fitzpatrick, Devin Bush, Cameron Hayward, TJ Watt. You see where I'm going. For Pittsburgh to win a 7th ring this year would be incredible, and it would be the cherry on top for Ben's Hall of Fame career. And yes, Ben, whether you like him or not, will get in the Hall of Fame, as will multiple other quarterbacks from that 2004 draft class. Now, as we wrap up today's video, I hope you guys enjoyed. We will be getting back to reasons why teams cannot win the Super Bowl this year, or will not win the Super Bowl, but I did want to kind of split it up in the middle and not just have a repetitive series of why teams will not win the Super Bowl. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. There are several other teams that could be categorized as in win now mode, because again, the Chiefs, like the Bucks, Seahawks, and Packers, they're not trying to rebuild. They're contenders. I wouldn't say they're in win now mode, but they are definitely contenders, not to say they're pretenders, because they're obviously not. That can be taken way out of context, but what I'm saying is there are a lot of teams that can be categorized as in win now mode. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It would mean the world, and until next time, have a great day. Love you guys. Deuces. Peace.